A cold wind sweeps through the quiet cornfield, rustling the tall stalks that seem to stretch on endlessly. I never imagined a simple detour could lead to such a terrifying experience. What started as a fun weekend getaway with friends quickly turned into a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. It was supposed to be an escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. Just me, Emma, Mike, and Sarah out in the countryside for a few days of relaxation. We rented a quaint little cabin on the edge of a vast cornfield, lured by its rustic charm and promise of tranquility. Little did we know, this cornfield held dark secrets. The first night was uneventful, filled with laughter and stories around the bonfire. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the cornfield. I remember Sarah joking about how the scene looked like something out of a horror movie. We laughed it off, unaware of the sinister events about to unfold. The next day, we decided to explore the area. The weather was perfect, with a crisp autumn breeze and clear blue skies. We wandered into the cornfield, marveling at how the tall stalks created a natural labyrinth. It felt like an adventure, but as we ventured deeper, the atmosphere began to change. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence fell over the field. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place. I noticed the cornstalks were unnaturally tall, their leaves whispering secrets as they swayed in the wind. We were deep in the cornfield when we found it. A circle of dead corn, the stalks blackened and withered. "What the hell happened here?" Mike asked, breaking the silence. None of us had an answer. The sight was unnerving, but we brushed it off as some natural phenomenon. Looking back, I wish we had turned around then and there. But curiosity got the better of us. As we moved past the dead zone, the sense of unease grew stronger. We came across strange symbols etched into the ground, unlike anything I had ever seen. Emma suggested they might be remnants of some ancient ritual. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, Sarah screamed. We turned to see her staring at the ground, pale as a ghost. There, partially buried in the dirt, was a weathered, human-like figure made of straw. It was a crude scarecrow, but its eyes' deep hollows filled with darkness seemed to follow us. We decided it was time to head back. The playful curiosity that had led us into the cornfield was replaced by a growing sense of dread. As we retraced our steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The cornfield, once a symbol of rural peace, now felt like a living entity, malevolent and aware of our presence. The journey back seemed longer and more disorienting. The paths we had taken earlier now seemed unfamiliar. Panic began to set in as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced ominously among the stalks. Just when we thought we were hopelessly lost, we stumbled upon an old, dilapidated barn. It stood at the center of another circle of dead corn. Desperation drove us inside, seeking refuge from the encroaching darkness. The interior was musty and filled with the remnants of past lives, old farming tools, rotting hay bales, and broken furniture. We decided to spend the night there, thinking it safer than wandering the cornfield in the dark. But the barn held its own terrors. As night fell, strange sounds filled the air, whispers, footsteps, and faint, mournful cries. It was as if the cornfield itself was alive, mourning and watching us. Emma tried to rationalize it as the wind playing tricks, but deep down, we all knew something was terribly wrong. Mike suggested we take turns keeping watch. I volunteered for the first shift, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The hours dragged by, each minute filled with an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of corn. Just past midnight, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic chanting carried on the wind. I peered through a crack in the barn wall and saw faint, flickering lights moving through the cornfield. My heart raced as I watched shadowy figures performing a ritual around the scarecrow we had seen earlier. I woke the others, my voice barely a whisper. We huddled together, peering through the cracks, our fear palpable. The figures moved with a deliberate, eerie grace, their chants growing louder and more intense. The scarecrow seemed to come to life, its hollow eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Suddenly, the chanting stopped. The figures turned as one, their gaze fixed on the barn. It was as if they knew we were there. Panic set in, and we scrambled to find a way out. But before we could act, the barn door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was an old man, his face lined with age and eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and malice. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "This place is not for the living." We tried to explain, to apologize, but he silenced us with a wave of his hand. "You have disturbed the harvest," he continued. "Now you must face the consequences." His words sent a shiver down my spine. What did he mean by the harvest? Before we could react, the barn was filled with a blinding light. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath us seemed to pulse with life. The old man began to chant, and the spectral figures outside joined in, their voices rising in a haunting harmony. I felt a force pulling me towards the old man, as if the very air was alive. My friends were similarly affected, unable to resist the invisible hands dragging us forward. The scarecrow outside seemed to loom larger, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. As we reached the center of the barn, the old man stopped chanting and looked at us with a mix of pity and regret. "The cornfield demands a sacrifice," he said, "to appease the spirits and ensure the harvest continues." The ground beneath us split open, revealing a deep, dark pit. The chanting grew louder, more frenzied, and the spectral figures outside danced around the barn, their movements a macabre celebration. We were being offered as sacrifices to some ancient, insatiable entity. In a final desperate attempt, Mike lunged at the old man, but he was thrown back by an unseen force. "It is too late," the old man whispered. "The harvest must be completed." The pit yawned wider, and the pull grew stronger. I felt myself teetering on the edge, my strength failing. Emma's screams echoed in the barn, mingling with the chants and the sound of rustling corn. Just as I thought we were lost, a blinding light filled the barn. The old man screamed, and the spectral figures outside faltered. I felt the pull lessen, and the ground beneath us began to solidify. The light grew brighter, driving the spectral figures back into the cornfield. The old man fell to his knees, his chanting turning to cries of anguish. The pit closed, leaving us gasping for breath, shaken but alive. The barn fell silent, save for our ragged breaths. The spectral figures had vanished, and the old man lay motionless on the ground. We didn't wait to see if he would recover. We bolted out of the barn and ran through the cornfield, not stopping until we reached the safety of our cabin. We collapsed inside, locking the doors and windows, our bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. None of us spoke, the events of the night too raw, too terrifying to put into words. We huddled together, waiting for the first light of dawn. As the sun rose, we dared to venture outside. The cornfield looked the same as it had when we first arrived, but we knew better. We packed our things in silence, eager to leave this cursed place behind. As we drove away, I glanced back at the cornfield. It stood silent and still, but I could feel its malevolent presence watching us leave. I vowed never to return, to put as much distance between us and that place as possible. The journey home was a blur, our minds replaying the horrors we had witnessed. We parted ways, each of us struggling to come to terms with what had happened. The cornfield had changed us, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal, but the memories lingered. I found myself unable to sleep, haunted by visions of the spectral figures and the old man's chant. The cornfield's whispers echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the nightmare we had survived. I tried to research the area to find some explanation for what we had experienced. I discovered old legends of the cornfield, tales of ancient rituals and sacrifices made to ensure bountiful harvests. But none of them could fully explain the horrors we had faced. One night, as I lay awake, I heard a familiar sound, the rustling of cornstalks. My heart pounded as I looked out the window, half expecting to see the spectral figures outside. But the night was still, the cornfield miles away. The sound grew louder, more insistent, and I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was in my mind, a haunting reminder of the cornfield's curse. I knew then that we would never truly escape its grasp. I reached out to my friends, hoping they were coping better than I was. But their voices were filled with the same fear and unease. We were all haunted by the cornfield, its dark influence reaching across the distance. We decided to meet, to talk about what had happened and how to move forward. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and shared nightmares. But it helped, knowing we weren't alone in our suffering. Together, we vowed to find a way to break the cornfield's hold on us. We researched ancient rituals, sought out experts in the occult, and even considered returning to the cornfield to confront whatever entity lurked there. But deep down, we knew the truth. The cornfield's curse was unbreakable. It had claimed a part of us, a harvest of shadows that would never be fully returned. And as the sound of footsteps echoed in the quiet cornfield, I realized that some nightmares never end.